Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and welcome to our second session, which will be the basics of generative AI and prompt fundamentals. So today, that is what we'll be going through, just some basics in terms of prompt engineering. Our lead facilitator today is Mr. Janusz Kaczynski, and myself and Sylvester Jeffries will be co-facilitating the session. So if there are any questions or you would like to engage during the session, please you can raise your hand or drop your questions in the chat, and we'll see how we can respond to that. So Janusz will be taking us through today's session today. We will have a question and answer session at the end. The session is being recorded, so if you want to have a look at it one more time, it will be made available as a recording. So without wasting any further time, I'm now going to hand over to Janusz to begin our session.
Thank you, Annalisa, and welcome to those of you who have joined us today. Thank you very much. I hope you will enjoy the session and find it informative. Okay, so today we are really just looking at a bit of the background of generative AI. If my slide will, okay, there we go. So we're just basically looking at a little bit of the background of generative AI, how we got to where we are today, we're going to look at the difference between the two sort of main generative AI models that are in use, large language and large multimodal. We're going to look at a little bit of the actual interaction that we use, the AI apps, the chatbots that are the sort of front end, and then we'll have Sylvester will just wrap up our week one and technically our first session, which is today, and the assignments that we'll be giving you for the next session to complete before the next session. Okay, so the first step today is going to be a little puzzle that we would like you all to attempt to solve. It's your answer. Where's my? I don't seem to have my. So I'm going to launch a poll. Colleagues, remind me, do I need to relaunch or is it launched? Relaunch. Okay, there we go. All right, so you should see a questionnaire on your screen. So please go ahead and you can start slotting your answers in to the question in front of you. Oops, I'm getting tangled in my network of wires here. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes just to read through the question and start considering your answer. Ugh. Okay, it's good to see we're getting a nice flow of answers. Thank you. The poll will remain up, so you should be able to see the question. So I'm just going to move on to a little interlude. So just a reflection on probably an experience we've all had where we're pretty much convinced that the message we've received has been written by uh, an AI assistant. All right, so thanks for those of you who completed the workshop survey. The link, I think, is still available or has been sent to you. I'm not sure if we've had more responses since then. I actually was meant to check and failed to. But just based on the responses we had received, it looks like most of you are using, well, the vast majority of you, three-quarters, are making use of libguides, are making use of AI in some form or another. But it's also interesting to see that a quarter of you are resisting. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, adopting AI, but it's good to see that at least some of you are considering it, and those of you, I'm assuming the quarter of you who are joining us for these sessions are wanting to learn a bit more before you start taking advantage of the tools. It's an interesting spread. A lot of us, less than a quarter of us, are making use of the AI on a daily basis. Um, but it is interesting that at least most of between those that are using it daily and weekly, there's almost 50% of us are making regular use of AI tools, or the 70% of us that are using them. And if we look at the different tools that we are using it for, um, so it's things like the vast majority are using it for educational purposes. We'll obviously need to, at a later stage, dig a little bit deeper into what that actually is. And at least half of us are using it to assist with content creation. So that would be writing either reports, maybe uh, assignments, emails, who knows. So that's interesting. And then only a small number using it for some of the common stuff like brainstorming and or search strategies, which is interesting. So we'll definitely dig down into that pattern of usage. All right, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page with how we are going to explain well, the language we're going to use. So just to clear up, so a prompt is really just that single instruction that you give to an AI. While prompt engineering is a more refined and set of instructions that you craft to use with the AI that hopefully will give you more relevant and accurate responses. And a chatbot is really just that user interface. It is the one that is simulating that conversation, but it is not, and that's often where the confusion creeps in. It's not the AI itself. It is really just the interface. So well, we'll go into a little bit more detail a bit later, but there are different, like if we talk about something like Elicit, it's actually it is the chatbot and it's using ChatGPT as the model. But we'll go into a little bit more detail and explain that a little bit further on. Okay, so a little bit of the background to what is this generative AI and where it all came from. So really, AI is just that kind of sort of the whole field of research or development within the computer science. It is something that is basically the attempt to make computers think. And this has been around for years. I mean, we've all heard of the Turing test, and Turing was working in the 1940s and 50s. So the groundwork for this AI was all developed in the 1950s, really, as computers became more commonplace, obviously not in homes as that stage, but as for large corporations and universities. And the idea was that, we could make a computer think like a human mind, develop computers that could think humanly, act rationally, um, human qualities in an ideal world. And I wonder sometimes if that wasn't a response to what was happening globally, that it would have been better to hand over thought to machines that were going to be more rational. So as time passed, obviously the things developed further, and the Turing test was sort of the standard that to use to measure the AI ability. So it basically looks at if a human was interacting with a computer, would they be able to determine whether or not it was a computer or a human? So basically, could it communicate successfully? Could it store what it learned? So if you gave it your name, could it remember that and then repeat it back to you, for example? And could it use stored information to reason, to answer questions? So as you can see from, if you've had any interaction with an AI, that's exactly what they can do. And then further is the ability for the computer program to adapt to new situations, new environments, new information, and revise its answers. So, like I said, if you've had any sort of interaction with a generative AI, it certainly ticks pretty much all those boxes. So machine learning, which is kind of the broader area, is where computers can store all this information, they can determine patterns, and from that um, infer uh, apply certain rules. So we come across this on a regular basis. So things like spam filters, predictive text, all of these little tools that we interact with on a daily basis are basically machine learning. Because it was the start of recognizing patterns and being able to almost make decisions based on those patterns. That was the start of sort of the evolution to active thinking. And that is where deep learning comes in, and that is basically trying to create an artificial brain within a computer. So um, it's really just programming certain techniques into a computer where it applies a principle based on the concept of a human neural network or human brain. And then the next step of which is generative AI is using those two systems, previous machine learning, basically taking all the data, being able to recognize patterns, deep learning, where you take now that data and those patterns and you apply a neural network to it and create something that basically can learn from all of this and respond by creating new content. And that is really the critical difference between all of these previous things, is the fact that generative AI creates new content, unlike it's not regurgitating old information, it's synthesizing information into a new form. And but we some of us fear this evolution. I'm sure we've all come across those and it's quite in a way it's understandable. As a species, humans, we only developed the concept of language communication 100,000 years ago, and the ability to write about 7,000 years ago. We are the only animals on the planet that have ever evolved to that level. And we, in a few decades, have managed to create computer programs that have um, displayed language ability that makes it almost impossible for us to identify the difference. And that's literally happened in the blink of an eye. And it's evolving every day. In fact, there was just a news report this morning saying that ChatGPT is releasing a new version which is going to be able to think even better. I don't like the terminology, but more advanced way of putting together answers. So just to talk about the two models, so basically we have two main versions of generative AI out there. So the large language models, which the original ChatGPT and many of the others basically just used lots of text data, and all their inputs and outputs were in a text, basically. And now large multimodal models have evolved where these are able to read things like audio and video and images, and then output that uh, their outputs in the same format. So creating pictures, creating audio, creating video, and for all we know, that it could evolve even further. Um, so this is where we are kind of now, and it opens a whole new window of opportunities. If you could, just think about how it would potentially be able to say take a block of text from a book and turn it into a completely visual um, interpretation of that, a video or something of that particular scene, or turn it. I mean, okay, really they can read, but start reading with inflection. It has a lot of potential to make stuff more accessible. So the main large language models out there that we are aware of. Um, so you've got things like, well, there's the list in front of you. Obviously, we're all familiar mostly with ChatGPT. The others maybe not so much. Llama, which is the one that is developed by Meta, and a few others. So just to reiterate what I said earlier, things like Elicit it's an AI tool. It basically looks to finding uh, scholarly articles using keywords and subject headings, and you can enter a question and so on, so basically what it is the earlier version of ChatGPT using I think version 3 still, maybe 3.5. It uses so it's using that model, it's using that data set, but then it is only using a subset, which is Semantic Scholar sourced papers for its search. So for its answers, it's only looking at a smaller data set and not the large data set. It will become maybe a little bit clearer as we go along. There's also Site AI. It's another one that also similar. It uses scientific papers and research data. And then there's things like perplexity, which is also it based off another model, but it also then just searches the web and is using uh, so it uses the main data to create this main model and then a subset of data. These are the multimodal models. So you'll see ChatGPT appears there again because it is a multimodal model. So there's obviously a lot fewer multimodal models out there, but Grok, for example, is the one that it works functions for through Twitter. So that's our friend Elon. Well, not our, or maybe not our friend Elon, depending on your perception. Um, and so that is accessed basically through through Twitter. You can upload your text and questions to it, and it uses the data set created from Twitter to answer whatever query you may choose to put into it. Okay, so how do you go about building an AI model in your garage, if you have one? Okay, so the first bit is this huge amount of data that has been collected over the years. So there are a couple of open data sets out there that have been made available. So like the original one that was used to train ChatGPT. And these are massive amounts of data that has been collected across, usually across the internet. So, for example, the sort of one of the publicly available data sets that is about 580 terabytes in size, and that's the equivalent of about 6 trillion printed pages of text. We have at this stage no idea of where Google or Microsoft or Meta are getting their data from. But of course, we have been steadily giving them out our data for years. So I guess we have an investment in it now to make use of it. So then you can also use a custom data set. So this would be, for example, if you like taking that example of illicit, you would you are only then using a subset that semantic scholar subset of data that is you now using that in order to ask the questions. And then you can also cross-reference that what data set with, so you're tuning the system, making sure that it is referring to the correct information, that it's linking it all together. And then there's the secret formula, the model, this artificial neural network, and how the system assigns value to various inputs. It's computer science on a whole other level. And don't worry, we're not going to be expected to, we're not testing you on that one. But basically, the bottom line is you would have an input into that neuron, your question. It's also then going to look back at the data sets and try and assign a value and a meaning to what your input in. And so how do you actually get that answer? Well, it really is a set of weighted dice. The generative AI really is it's almost random. Its responses, but obviously there is a weight added to how it determines that answer. And so it basically, the AI goes out there and tries to predict the answer to your question. So that is why you will often see if you ask an AI the same question more than once, you will get a different answer each time. And that's basically the principle. So instead of like searching a set of data or a database, that would give you back the same answer every time. And generative AI will generate that answer on the fly using these various predictive models, but it's not always going to be the same, which adds a whole new parameter to how do we refer back to content generated by an AI, and how would we cite it, and so on. So like I said, we're not here for a computer science class. So we won't go into, but it's basically it's a mathematical prediction, and that's why errors can creep into the results, and that's why sometimes as we'll demonstrate a little bit further on, it is more difficult for a AI to answer certain kinds of questions, because it can only refer back to what its model is telling it to do. Um, and not all models are created equal. Okay, so a little bit more depth into, so we have a set of training data, like I mentioned. So all this massive model, there's all these websites, books, and so on that have been absorbed into this learning data set, and the AI learns how the language is structured. As we know, there are rules to language, so it can learn those. It can learn how different topics are maybe discussed. It can look at, so it then take that prompt that you put in. So for this example, we've got to explain the concept of photosynthesis. And it basically, the AI model will look around to try and to find words around that term. And then it's going to put them together for us in a answer. So here we have an example of this question, and off it goes to find the response. And as you can see, this is a fairly complicated or high-level explanation that it's giving us. It even provides us with a formula, and this is, it doesn't necessarily know who I am. It doesn't necessarily know what level I'm asking at. So this is how it goes about responding to that query. Now I asked the same query again, and this was the second answer I got within minutes of that first one. Much simpler answer, easier to understand, for perhaps, okay, it's still going into all the energy conversion stuff, but nonetheless, not a complicated answer. So once again, just indicating how the AI changes its response almost immediately, depending on on your question. And obviously, if we had added more prompts, it would have given us a more appropriate response. And since we're talking about photosynthesis and oxygen, I just thought it was an interesting time to perhaps talk about how much energy is required to do all of these AI answers. So currently, there's an estimation that of all the energy used by IT servers across the globe, only about 2 to 3% is used by AI. However, this is obviously going to grow, and as a comparison, a Google search uses about 0.3 of a watt of energy, whilst a ChatGPT query uses about 2.9 watts of energy. So as more and more of us start making use of AI, and it just becomes more prevalent in everything, we're obviously going to see a uptick in energy usage. So the other uh, sort of aspect of all these various open and AI models is the difference between open and closed models. So like with open source and proprietary, we have open AI models that are basically, we know what data they've been trained on. We understand they may have revealed how they the design of their neural network, and we can have a better understanding of why we may be getting the response we're getting. Um, there's uh, communities involved in advancing this. Uh, and there are three examples of open AI models. So closed models, we have far less insight into how these things work. We don't necessarily know how they are optimized. We don't always know where the data sets come from. Um, and perhaps it starts raising that question, then we don't necessarily know where that answer is generated from. They tend to be higher performing. So if we look at this graph of performance comparisons between open and closed AI models, you'll notice that the closed ones tend to be right at the top. However, the gap, like with everything, with open source software as well, the gap is closing, and perhaps in a few more years, the comparison will be much closer. Obviously, there's more money being poured into proprietary AI models, um, but yeah, it's just one of those questions that we still need an answer. So anyway, this particular benchmark used to rate these is called the Massive Multitask Language Understanding Benchmark, and it's made up of 57 tasks, including things like basic math, US history, unfortunately, just showing the bias of the whole information science community, computer science questions, law-related questions, and others. So it was basically the whole reason for now needing a benchmark was these AI's responses were becoming were basically surpassing the ability of humans, and they needed a way of ranking them, and this is where they came up with this particular benchmark. Just as an example, ChatGPT 3.5 now ranks, which was launched only, what, maybe last year, if my memory serves, that already ranks now 93rd on the list. So we have advanced that far up the ladder in just a short period of time. There are other ranks. This is a rank arena leaderboard. If you visit that website, it will provide you a lot more information. So you can see that ChatGPT, the latest version, is the overall ranks the highest. And they basically have measured it over various criteria. They also have a popularity, which one people prefer using. And you can see that overall ChatGPT is the most effective, whilst there are other models that rank high or equivalent in certain fields, like Claude in math and say Gemini in longer queries. Exclude refusal at the end there is where the model is able to detect a um, negative or tricky response, and can refuse to answer that query. It's the ability for it to not get confused into those less than um, what's the word? Polite responses. So now all right, so yeah, I mean, I'm sure you may have experienced this, but this is an example of an interaction with a chatbot and how it is very okay. I mean, obviously the language is a little bit stilted, but nonetheless, this could be a colleague, two colleagues chatting, just and it sounds very like a normal conversation to a certain extent. And um, how would you tell necessarily that that wasn't a computer giving you this useful advice? Okay, so what we did with that question we got you all to answer earlier, which I think I am going to reveal the results of if I can find my Zoom control. Uh, okay, so let's. Sylvester, can people see the results, or am I the only one?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let's see. We've got most people settling on 8 minutes, but a fair spread across the board. So let's see. As I said, put this question to various AIs. So let's see how their responses match up with what everybody else got. Okay, so Character AI is one of those custom AI models. It basically can pretend to be various people, and as you converse with it, it puts on a certain personality. So a little bit of a more entertaining one to talk to. But we asked the same question we asked you, and it seemed to think so. Only 2% of you, one of you agreed with that particular AI, Meta, using the Llama model, came back with 10 minutes. So 5 of you agreed with that solution. And this is its explanation of how it came to that conclusion. Gemini, which is the Google one, decided that it takes 15 minutes, which 6 of you agreed with. And then we've got Copilot, which uses the ChatGPT model. Came down to 12 minutes, which only 2 of you agree with. And Claude came down also with 12 minutes. So that's the anthropic model, also proprietary. And well, us humans apparently all thought it should be 8 minutes. And we went and asked a 9-year-old the same question. And a 9-year-old beat millions of dollars of research and answered the question correctly. So the correct answer is actually 8 minutes. So why is it that this these brilliant AIs could not answer that simple question that more than 70% of us got correct and a 9-year-old child? And basically, it's how the AI goes about answering the question. It goes and looks at related data, and because this particular question is a derivative of a question where there were originally 4 people crossing the bridge, all of these AIs kept trying to make 4 people cross a bridge. If you look back at the various results, you'll notice that it will keep sending Alice back across or Ben across or randomly, unnecessarily, in order to try and now make 4 people cross a bridge when there were only 3 people to start with. So just throwing that simple little curveball at the AI made it a bit confused. So how can we fix that problem? So this is our activity today, is to we'll spend a few minutes in, we're going to split us all up into breakout rooms. I think Sylvester is going to set that up for us, hopefully. And we're each going to be picking a particular Gen AI model, and we'll ask you guys to try and revise the prompt so that we can work towards getting the AI to respond correctly. Sylvester, is that
Yes, that's correct.
okay?
Uh,
Are you
so I'm ready to split everyone into three rooms. You just give the
okay?
go ahead.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Okay. Uh, but I think just before we go into that uh, breakout room, are there any questions so far, just to clarify anything that was discussed? Anyone in the room, you may unmute yourself or throw it into the chat box. Okay, Patricia.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the interesting and quite exciting presentation. On building a generative AI model, I wanted to ask if OpenAI is not sharing ChatGPT code for any companies that wish to create like custom GPTs, because I think I've heard something to that effect, but I'm not quite sure how that works.
Okay, yeah, you are partially correct. So you can, and for example, like I mentioned, Elicit is using the ChatGPT 3.0 model for their um, AI bot. So you can, as if you sign up for the paid version of ChatGPT, you can go and create your own AI tool. If you ever visit ChatGPT, and there is on the screen, there is somewhere, I think towards the top or the bottom, it offers you like various add-ons. Those add-ons are basically using the ChatGPT engine, but have been modified or are designed to do a particular job. Uh, so they've been coded basically to be more what's the word, more advanced at a particular narrower task than the general generative AI. So yes, you can, but they won't give you their model. They will loan you access basically. And then of course, remember, they'll be constantly using whatever data you put into it, will be training their model. Um, to run your own, you would need a huge data center, massive amounts of storage, and very deep pockets. It's not really something you can build in your backyard, but there are versions that can be, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Device specific. But they obviously have very limited ability and a much reduced set of data to use to answer questions. But yeah, so if you are willing to pay for that Chat GPT full version, you can make use of their tools and create your own chatbot and your own AI. So it won't be your model, but it will be your own AI chatbot.
Okay, thank you. Any other pressing question that we can quickly deal with before we head into a breakout room activity? Going once, twice, gone. Okay, so we're going to head into a breakout room for, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes. And then in the last 5 minutes of the session, we'll do a wrap up and take any other questions which you can unmute yourself or post it into the chat box. So here we go. Janusz, uh, Uh, I just want to check if my co-facilitators are back in the main room. Janusz and Elisa, please could you confirm if you're back here? Okay, let's just give everyone a chance to come back in here. They should be back in the main room in a few seconds. Uh, Thank you. I'm assuming everyone should be back in here. I think we were sitting on plus minus 60 participants. Uh, yeah, I hope that everyone had a good chance to just have a quick exploration of a GPT. But if not, it is part of your homework activity between now and our next session in 2 weeks' time. Um, could we go into the wrap up, and then I will discuss the way forward between now and the next session, Janusz?
I just thought maybe we'd give, since your maybe quick rundown of the experience within your
Oh yeah.
room. I can just speak
Yeah.
from our side. We were using Claude. We could not get Claude to solve the problem, even when we gave Claude the answer. And then, of course, we ran out of free chats. So,
Mhm.
but we had some interesting insight from members of the group, pointing out that we are trying to make a language model, trying to solve a maths-based problem. And perhaps if we would also need to bear in, and this was a very useful insight, that it's, if we are going to make use of AI in our workplaces, we do need to be aware that we may not have the expertise to check if the answer is correct. Fortunately, this was a relatively simple problem, but if we are going to use it for research purposes or recommend it for research purposes to users, we need to be acknowledge that we may not be the subject expert, and that the answer may not be correct. So I thought that was an important insight to take away from that, as well as the fact that perhaps we need to feed the model more information in relation to the particular question.
Yeah. Uh, I could jump in here just to share from my group. We explored Gemini as well as Microsoft Pilot, and we had the exact same experiences. Neither of them could give us the correct result of 8 minutes. In fact, when we fed one of them the correct answer, it told us that it's impossible to get 8 minutes. So essentially telling us that no, and then in its second response, it says to us that uh, because of the constraints, the time constraints, it will actually come to 11 minutes. So it changed its tune from 12 minutes to 11 minutes. So exactly like you said, we share the same sentiment that we need that human intervention. We need that critical thinking skill to still verify that information so that you're not taking an or a hallucination or inaccurate or fabricated uh, data. In this case, a mathematical computation, which if you work it out, it does come to 8 minutes. We still need to intervene. So yeah, that was also the insight that was coming from our side. And then I just shared with the group that they could go and explore it further by maybe looking at other GPTs just to familiarize themselves with it, so that we can prepare for the actual for the next session where we will go a bit deeper into prompting. Annalisa?
Thanks, Sylvester. So in our group, we also try to refine the prompt a little, giving ChatGPT extra information and emphasizing a few things, but still the result was not the correct answer. At some point, it did give us a breakdown of 8 minutes and gave us 8 minutes as the total number that it took for everyone to cross the bridge. But the explanation and the breakdown of who went and when was totally incorrect. So still, it did give us the answer, but the breakdown just did not add up. So we also touch on the issue of the bot's capability and how it has been trained. Yeah, so our findings were also similar to the other groups. Thank you.
Thank you. And Annalisa, just to confirm, which chatbot were you using?
We're using ChatGPT.
Thank you. And that actually aligns with the rankings that Janu showed earlier on, that ChatGPT, even though all three of us fed these chatbots the correct answer being 8 minutes, Janusz and I struggled to get ours to actually give or get to 8 minutes. ChatGPT, on the other hand, they could get to 8 minutes, but the only thing there was the steps in terms of who went where for how long. That may have not been accurate. Thank you. Janusz, do you want to do a quick wrap up and then I can discuss the way forward?
Yeah, thanks, Sylvester. So I hope you found that session interesting and insightful, and gave you some satisfaction that we'll not be replaced by AI in the near future. We are slightly more intelligent for now, especially when it comes to certain logic problems, and the ability to take to create new information based on a question. So, it will be interesting to see. There's like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a new release of ChatGPT coming out, and I think in the either next week or the next couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see if that will have the ability to answer that question correctly. So keep an eye on that space, on that bookmark. Then just if you have an interest in some further reading or further watching, there's a couple of very new open access book, very interesting for using generative AI in higher education. A lot of what I spoke about today came out of this particular book, so very informative, goes into a lot of depth, and if you have an interest in that, really very interesting. And as well as the PEC. Also, it's a website, but at least it gives you some interesting information and some basic outlines. Sylvester, do I need to hand over the screen sharing to you?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
Just keep it here. There is
Okay.
a question in the chat box.
Okay.
One question: is it safe to use fact check AI?
Oh,
I can,
once again,
I
yeah. Can you answer? Do you want to answer that
yes,
one?
yes.
Okay.
As a digital literacies librarian at UWC Library, I've actually done sessions on this. So I would say yes, it's generally safe to use fact check AI tools, but again, it's important to approach them with caution. Uh, I mean, like we've just demonstrated in this session, accuracy may not be 100% there. Uh, so these fact-checking tools, they rely on the quality of their data and algorithms. So while they can quickly process that information for you, it may not always be 100% accurate or provide 100% accurate results. So you need to cross-check it with reliable, I would say, human-reviewed sources where possible. Because the other thing you also have to keep in mind here is AI can inherit biases from data that it's trained on, which it may influence the outcomes thereof. Yeah, so there are a couple of I would say trusted fact checking sites. I think Snopes being one of them. I just can't recall the others off my head. We could actually include that in our e-learning resource, which I'll talk about just now. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
I think that did, yeah.
Sure. The next one, even though maths problems make me break out in a sweat, like AI, I guess the answer, but my guess was lucky. Yeah, some of us did not do higher grade maths at school. So I get what you're saying there. Thank you. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's pretty much it for this session. Just in terms of our e-learning resource, where one, you will get all the materials that we discussed here, as well as further readings, as well as the uh, assessments that we would like you, or assignments that we'd like you to take part in offline or asynchronously between now and the next session, which is also a way just for to prepare you in a flipped classroom approach for the next session. I mean, an hour to go through this is not enough. Yeah, we are already 15 minutes over. So we would like you to participate in that way by going through the e-learning resource. I was hoping to show that to you right now, but I am unable to do so. One, because we are over time. So what we are going to do in an email, we've got all your email addresses, but I also want to ask that if you're still in the room, just throw your email address into the chat box, just so that we can verify with people that registered with Liasa and what is thrown into this chat box. We would like to email you all these materials. And this is obviously in addition to the email that will come from Liasa with the recording of this session. And in that email, we will provide you access to the learning resource. And on that learning resource, it will be clearly laid out what you need to do between now and our next session in 2 weeks' time. Okay. But please do take part in the quiz activity that's on there, and a very short assignment which will basically prepare you for the next session. Thank you, everyone. If there are any questions, you may remain behind.
Thank you so much, Sylvester and Janusz, and thank you to all our participants who joined us today and stayed up until the very last minute. And we do apologize for going over time, but as Sylvester had said, there's so many exciting stuff that we really want to fit into one session, and that is not enough. So I do encourage you to peruse and engage with the e-learning resource once we've shared that information. So without wasting any further time, colleagues, thank you so much for joining us. The recording will be circulated via our Liasa mailing list, and we hope to see you in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.